Good evening and welcome to our virtual Watershed Symposium. Today is Thursday, November 6th, and we are going to get started with our welcome and icebreaker. So I'll turn it over to Martin Chris.
We're going to show 1 to 3 slides from each of many different watersheds. I encourage you to slide that boundary to make the pictures bigger. Again, these are West Virginia streams. In the pictures, put up a reaction if you know where the place is. At some point, we'll come to a black slide. And at that point, I encourage you to slide the boundary back to shrink the pictures and grow the faces. We will call on one person who has reacted to make a guess. We will then call on a resident expert from that watershed to say where the picture is and what story the picture tells. We're on a tight schedule, so as much as possible, be ready to unmute. If your dog is not barking at the UPS driver, you might be able to stay muted. So here we go. There we go.
That's pretty.
All right, put up a reaction if you know where it is, or if you care to guess.
Don't know.
Three Forks Creek, as I would say.
Decker's Creek.
Deckers, go.
Camp Creek.
Decker's Creek again.
Okay, so we had a few guesses. Good job. We'll call on the resident expert.
That's right. I'm friends of Decker's Creek. That was Decker's Creek. We start in the higher elevations of Preston County, splash down the gorge into Mon County, go into the Monongahela River right in the heart of downtown Morgantown. That's Decker's Creek.
And what was going on in the second picture? Anything in particular?
So in that picture, we just had a restoration event, and we just put coconut choir logs there to keep the erosion down. So it's we're trying to save the shoreline there.
Okay, thank you. Here we are again. Okay, yeah, let's move to the next watershed. Any guesses? Can't let you go without guessing. We gotta, before we get to the expert. I don't see a resident expert. I think it's up to you, Jen.
That's fine. These were shared from a watershed group down south. Anyone want to take a stab? That's my region.
Is it Piney Creek?
Yes, good. They're trying to promote their recreation. Their new executive director is a pretty avid whitewater kayaker, and he shared pictures of the recreational opportunities they're trying to highlight in the Beckley Piney Creek watershed.
All right, yep, that one's got kind of a hint. Any guesses?
What did he say?
Gee, must be
The Capon River.
Thank you. Do we have any resident experts? No experts? Alana?
I think Randy Weaver's on the call. Maybe she can't unmute herself, but she submitted this to show that they have a campaign going on that COVID kind of postponed, but they still plan to do a lot of it next year, where they have a bunch of different events that are all under this logo and motto of Keep the Capon Clean. And it's several different nonprofits working with Friends of the Capon River. And they're gonna do like macroinvertebrate monitoring and cleanups and float trips and just have a really good time on the Capon.
Great. Onwards. Any guesses?
That Coal River?
That's Coal River. And I believe we have a resident expert.
Yes, Little Coal River here. That's called flat water kayaking fishing. And I want everybody to notice there's no trash visible in any of these pictures. That's our story.
Good job, Bill.
Pretty wonderful. Onward. Any guesses?
Is that the cheat?
No? Good guess, though. Let's turn to a resident expert. Sally, John, either of you ready?
Yeah, that's our Float the Fork event on the West Fork River between Good Hope and West Milford, about 5 miles. We've had that event in 2018 and 2019. Very successful, about 150 paddlers. That's our primary fundraiser each year, but of course this year we couldn't have it. But we're hoping for next year.
Onward. Any reactions, any guesses?
Okay, that's the cheat.
Buchanan?
Nope.
No.
Tiger.
Buchanan. Huh?
Resident expert? Okay, well, it came from my region. Anyone else want to take a guess? Down
What
south.
is that, the Greenbrier?
Ah, thank you.
I was trying to find the unmute button.
No,
I didn't
it's fine.
see the photos, so I was like, that looks really familiar.
Yeah, these were from Jen Baker, who couldn't make it, and she's got a great eye. She always sends beautiful photos, and they're on Anthony boat launch is what you see there, and she sent some beautiful ones that are down at the Caldwell boat launch, and I think she's at Mulligan Creek, and they're beautiful. She's got a good eye. So if you haven't been on the Greenbrier, you should go on the Greenbrier. I think it's busy right now. This time. Well, maybe not right now, but COVID season, it's been busy.
Dot?
Yes.
Yes.
Resident expert. The resident expert.
Yeah, the first one is the other two. One is where the Guyandotte comes out of R.D. Bailey Dam. And then the one on the right there is during our regatta, and that's in Logan County. And that was in 2018, I believe, when we had regattas in 5 different counties, all on the same day at the same time. So.
Onward. Any guesses?
Whole River?
Nope.
Elk River.
Thank you. All right, where's I saw our resident expert a bit ago. Kelly?
I'm here. Yeah, I'm here. So this is the tributary to the Tigert River. And the first one, this one is actually 2 different streams. On the left is the Barlow Portal flowing into the left fork of Little Sandy. And on the right is Beaver Creek. And both of those were kind of working to do some remediation. And then the second picture was the Taylor County Adventure Club floating on the Tiger, doing their lazy river floats on the Tigert below the dam.
Very cool. Moving on.
Sleepy Creek.
Somebody already does.
Resident expert.
Yeah, you're right. That's Sleepy Creek. After a 7-year effort, working collaboratively with a lot of the folks on here, the agencies and whatnot, we are actually able to accomplish stream restoration of about 600 feet. And the photo that was on the right was taken on Halloween. And the bottom line of it was the restoration should save 81 tons of sediment entering the creek annually. So it was a long-term effort, but we're very happy that we got it done. This one here, despite the pandemic, we had volunteers come out and do tree plantings. We were accomplishing about 250 trees this year and riparian buffers. The couple in the back on the right were working their property when the pandemic hit. They ended up planting over 200 trees themselves. So it was a major effort, but we didn't let the pandemic stop us totally.
Excellent. So as we go through, you're going to see one more Sleepy Creek slide because I stole the logo from it, so to help you not guess. All right, any guesses on this one?
That's Chief River for sure.
Yeah.
Muddy Creek.
All right, and the next picture. All right, we've had some good guesses. Is the resident otter available?
Yeah, we're here. Hi. It's friends of the. That's actually the confluence with the Big Sandy, but you showed Muddy Creek and the Cheat, and that's. Yes. And I'm here, I'm Amanda, I'm here with Beth, and I think Maddie's on too.
Any guesses on this place?
No.
I'm gonna name it Muddy Creek.
Guesses.
Was it the Potomac?
It's in that drainage. It's in that Huckate, or I'm gonna say that's a hard one and say, let's get our resident expert.
This picture is a float group on the Opequon Creek. The Opequon is a tributary of the Potomac. And the first picture with the word illegal stamped across all the sediment flowing is on Specs Run. The Specs Run is a tributary of the Opequon. 30 plus loads of drilling slurry from boring under the highway to put a fiber optic line were dumped on an adjacent property. Specs Run is just a small stream, nothing much alive in it anymore. Some of the sediment got down to the Opequon. The Opequon Watershed is a group that is in Virginia and West Virginia for the entire length of the creek. And this is one of our annual floats that we normally do every year, but of course not 2020. We also do streamside cleanups, and we've been involved in creating urban parks in Winchester and soon to be in Martinsburg, West Virginia.
So many stories. It's great. Moving on.
Oh, that's Laurel Run.
Oh yeah, that's Laurel Run.
Laurel Run.
Excellent. We have a resident expert.
I guess that's me.
Yeah.
Many times I stood under that waterfall after a hard day's work and cooled off.
Yeah.
Our group started back in the late 80s in response to strip mining, wanting to expand into our area. We were pretty lucky. We fended that off. And at this point, very few threats. There's a housing development that has a storage treatment facility that's usually out of compliance. That's our main problem. That and, you know, cattle in the stream. But it still supports a trout population and is doing pretty well.
Amen. And that's it for this.
Love that, Martin. Thank you.
Well, thanks everyone. That was our icebreaker, a little trip around West Virginia to visit all of our local watersheds and hear from all of the great groups about what they're doing. But I'm just gonna go ahead and turn it over to Angie Rosser with West Virginia Rivers, and she's gonna go into some Advocacy 101 and give us a preview of what's to come in the upcoming legislative session.
All right, so Autumn, I wanted to do the polling first. Can you set that up? So this first question, does your group engage in advocacy? Yes, no, or I don't know.
Boom. We're gonna close it at 72%. You guys have 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, so I see, y'all can see that? The majority, the slight majority, 41% says yes, 36% no, and about a quarter, not sure, don't know. Okay, let's do question number 2. Does your group have a mission statement? And as if you've already voted, what I'd like you to do, that if you do have a mission statement and you know it by heart, could you type that in the chat? I'd like to get some examples of mission or purpose statements that groups have. And close that out. What I'm seeing shows that most of us do have a mission statement. And I'm seeing that Madison's has Friends of Cheat mission to restore, preserve, and promote the outstanding natural qualities of the Cheat River watershed. Can anybody else type in their mission statement? Eileen's got to promote the understanding, protection, and preservation of the creek and its tributaries for the use and enjoyment of current and future generations. Nice. Rita's got to protect and promote Laurel Run. And Friends of Blackwater. He works to protect, promote the natural, yeah, all that good stuff. Got Brian, improve the natural qualities. Okay, very good. All right, now I'm gonna try to do a trick here. Y'all see Advocacy 101? All right, so we're gonna first talk about advocacy and then talk about some of the policy issues related to West Virginia's waters. And this is a very high level like introduction to these topics. We don't have a lot of time to spend tonight, but wanted you all to have some familiarity with some of the, I guess, guidelines around advocacy and lobbying for what we call 501c3 organizations. That's a portion of the tax code that defines public charities that I think most of us fall under. And then we'll talk more about in the second half, spend about 10 or 15 minutes talking about what's ahead on the water policy front. So first, we're going to get some language going. What is advocacy? Well, here's the Merriam-Webster's definition of what is advocacy. It's the act or process of supporting a cause or proposal. And why I was interested in seeing some of your mission statements is because my sense and assumption is that many of you have named what the cause or the proposal or the vision that you are working toward in your watershed. And what I'm curious to explore with you is how does advocacy show up in the work we do as watershed organizations? And here's all of these things are examples of advocacy. I think a lot of you do an incredible job educating people in your community, your members, about your watershed and its needs. Some of you are doing research on your watershed. Many of you are holding events, whether that be cleanups or floats or tree plantings. Those can all be considered advocacy, again, if they are acts that you are doing to support your mission or your cause or your purpose. Lobbying is one example of advocacy, and we're going to come back and spend a little more time on lobbying and the definition of that. Another example is the work you do with your local media. Again, that kind of relates back to the education efforts we have of using the media as a way to get the word out about watershed health and needs and how people can get involved. And agency comments is another example that we frequently engage in. And I know some other watershed groups do too as a form of advocacy. All of these things are things that we can do as 501c3 organizations freely with only one exception, and that's lobbying. And we're going to explain more in a moment about some of the limitations around that. And the only other blanket limitation is that we have to be very careful about, if we're a 501c3 organization, is to avoid any direct or appearance of endorsement of candidates. So obviously in this recent past political season, that was something that we were very careful about and making sure that we didn't have that appearance. That is there is another category of 501c4 organizations that are part of the IRS tax code, that if you register as a 501c4 organization, then you can do what they call electoral work and get involved in candidate endorsements. But for most of us who fall in that 501c3 public charity, where we can accept donations that are then tax deductible to those donors, we have to steer clear of political involvement in campaigns and endorsements. And by the way, if people have questions as I'm going through this, we're going to go through this really fast, but if you do, please chat those in the box. Autumn's going to help me monitor those and see if we have time to come back to those or come back with you, follow up with you individually. So this issue of lobbying, this is a question I think 501c3s maybe have some misunderstandings about. The question is, can public charities, 501c3s, engage in lobbying activities? And the general answer is yes, we can. We can. The IRS tax code that says we can freely engage in lobbying activities as long as certain conditions are met. I'm going to get to those conditions. The other asterisk I want to put on this, though, is that many of us have, some of us have grant funds, and in particular, government grants customarily have a prohibition around lobbying, but understand that that prohibition is only limited to how you expend grant funds. So oftentimes, if you're expending government grant funds on a certain project or activity, that cannot include lobbying or trying to influence legislation. But that does not mean just because you have a government grant or a grant that has this prohibition that's funding a part of your work, that does not preclude your organization from doing advocacy or lobbying. So what is lobbying? Here's the official definition from our federal statute. And the key things I want to emphasize here are what I have in bold, is that lobbying is really about attempting to influence specific legislation. So it's a matter of using communications that contacts directly legislators or urges our members or the general public to contact legislators with that specific purpose of trying to urge them to propose, support, or oppose specific legislation. And this falls into two categories of lobbying. One is doing that direct communication to a decision maker. So here's a photo of a group of us meeting with Senator Manchin last year, and we were talking to him about legislation that would support the Chesapeake Bay program funding, and that is considered direct lobbying. Am I still with you? I'm getting the darn internet connection thing. Am I okay?
You're good.
We'll keep going until, okay. Then we have the category of grassroots lobbying. So this is an example where you are urging the general public to take an action, again, on specific legislation. And I just embedded here an image of something that we have on our website. So that is an example of urging people to contact delegates to vote yes on a specific piece of legislation. So that is the parameters of what's included with lobbying, and that relates to what I want to discuss again at a very high level on the limitations that are imposed on 501c3 organizations in terms of lobbying. This is where we get a little technical, and I'm going to give you a resource, a website to go if you all want to learn more of the details on this. There are basically two tests you can do just to give you an idea of how this works. One is looking at how you spend money and how much money the Watershed group is spending on this direct or grassroots lobbying. Again, meeting that definition of spending time, spending cost directly related to trying to influence a specific piece of legislation. Well, the test here is that if you are an organization with under a $500,000 budget, you can spend as much as up to 20% of that budget on lobbying activities. And this is something that West Virginia Rivers Coalition takes a close look at. We're well under that 20% threshold. Now, if you're a smaller organization with a smaller budget, there is another test that you can consider. It's a much more nebulous, though. It's called the insubstantial part test, and that the guidance is in comparison to your organization's overall activities. It's nebulous because, again, there's no metric, there's no number associated with this. It's a subjective interpretation of what insubstantial is. It's not been directly challenged in court, so there's not a lot of case law to guide us on what that word means. But if you're a watershed group doing a lot of the activities that I heard in the introduction, and that lobbying or trying to influence specific legislation is just a small piece or a piece of what you do, should meet this insubstantial part test. And again, we're talking about activities that are related to influencing specific legislation. So if you're talking to your local delegates or senators about the activities that you're working on, whether it be an event you have coming up or some of the projects you're working on, those things are not lobbying. That's part of communicating about action on a specific piece of legislation. Do you have to consider these limitations and costs? I'm going to touch on this very quickly and give you a resource if you want to know more. For state level lobbying, there are guidelines for when you need to go through a registration process. And the basic on this is unless you're receiving compensation for your lobbying activities, like I do, I'm a registered lobbyist because a portion of my time I am getting paid to talk with legislators directly about specific legislation. So every year or every 2 years, I update my lobbyist registration. I have to do certain reporting. It's part of my paid job. You don't have to register if you're doing lobbying on your own time without compensation. You're doing it as a volunteer. And your expenditures do not exceed this $150 mark. You also don't need to worry about registering if you're going to the Capitol to sit in on a committee meeting, or you're going to the DEP or somewhere to participate in a public hearing. That is not, there's no strings attached in terms of lobbying or having to register there. And then this third piece is if you are lobbying on behalf of your watershed group, but you're not getting compensated for it, again, you're there on your own time or you're volunteering, and you're doing that less than 20 days during any regular session, you're in the clear. No need to register. So here are the resources I mentioned that I highly recommend you all taking a look at if you are interested in learning more, talking with your members, volunteers, staff, board. This Boulder Advocacy group is where we have drawn on for a lot of our training and guidance. So check out boulderadvocacy.org. And then I've also included the West Virginia Ethics Commission if you're learning or interested in learning about more about the state rules and regs about registering to lobby. And I'm happy to follow up with anyone individually if you'd like to talk through this more. I've gotten some experience under my belt on making sure that we're very careful in following the rules that the Ethics Commission sets forward, and also maintaining the integrity of our 501c3 status, something you do not want to risk or compromise. Okay, so in transitioning to the next part of the program here, we're going to talk about timely and relevant water policy issues. And I guess the bridge to this is recognizing that, you know, as a water policy advocacy organization that West Virginia Rivers Coalition is, we can't do this alone. We spend a lot of time and money on analyzing policy and providing research and kind of science-based analysis that drives our messages and education that we provide legislators. Again, we're doing all that as part of the education piece of advocacy. That's not necessarily how to craft a specific bill and advance that bill. But my point of these next two slides is to say that change happens when there is the political will behind it to make it happen. And the political will becomes tangible to decision makers when they see and hear from their constituents that there is concern and support for whatever policies that we care most about, that we think will improve watershed or protect our watersheds. So while this kind of will show up, and I know we're in an unusual time and trying to figure out what in the world is the next legislative session, which starts in February, going to look like. But in the before times, it made a tremendous difference. This picture on the left is from 2014 when we had the major drinking water crisis around Charleston. And people came to the Capitol. They were demanding change. They were demanding protections. And those protections were achieved unanimously by the legislature in 2014. We saw a major water protection act passed that year. And it was clear to me it passed because people were paying attention and people were sharing their voice to the process and seeing that the decisions being made in our state capitol were affecting their confidence in the protection of drinking water supplies. And again, made a big difference. This picture on the right was something kind of simple and lovely, but very powerful. The woman in the lower left-hand corner, Lori Magana, she became known as the cookie lobbyist because what we're holding that you probably can't tell are water drops shaped cookies that say protect our water. And she would bring those whenever a committee was meeting that was considering a water issue and would give every member of that committee a cookie. And it became, again, a powerful symbol and message to those legislators that citizens and their constituents cared and were paying attention about the decisions being made. So again, the message I wanted to get across tonight is that involvement in our political processes and legislative processes makes a big difference for positive outcomes, and that as watershed organization, 501c3s, we can do this type of work. So I want to look ahead and give you a preview of what's coming down the stream in terms of water policy over the next weeks and months. The first thing I'll talk about is water quality standards. I hope you're familiar with this term. It's an important aspect of our state rules and code that serve as the legal basis for controlling the amount of pollution in and entering our waters. They play a big role in how point sources are permitted. And the idea, this is a function of the clean standards or limits in place so that we are assuring that there is not excessive pollution that interferes with the functions and uses of our rivers and streams. And that can be for drinking water, it can be for aquatic life, it can be for recreation and other uses. Every 3 years, the DEP goes through what's called a triennial review of its water quality standards. It seems like just as we're ending one review, we're starting another because it is a long process of public review and comment, and it also has to go through our legislative process. And in this past triennial review, it was even the timeline was extended. We were dealing with what's called the human health criteria of water quality standards. And this, I'll show you a timeline of what we've been engaged with over the past 5 years or so. But the human health criteria are criteria that involve pollutants that are most harmful to human health. They're the things that we as human beings need to be most concerned about that can cause disease or cancer. Many of these are carcinogens, and their pathway to harming us can be through recreation, it can be through consuming the fish caught in our rivers, and it can also be through drinking water, which we know many of us are drinking water that is treated from surface waters, rivers and streams, or groundwater. And in 2015, EPA recommended this to all of the states that these criteria, there was new science and data that supported how these criteria should be updated. Some of our human health criteria hasn't been updated in over 3 decades. And where we are with this now is that DEP has proposed 24 of those 94 be updated. And here's just some examples of what those criteria are. This is not extensive. And some of them have even longer names than this that are very hard to pronounce, but we have been doing a lot of research, Autumn has in particular, looking at where these types of pollutants exist, who is discharging them, at what levels in West Virginia. And we're finding that many of them are relevant to making sure we're providing the most updated protective measures. Okay, here's the timeline I was talking about that gives you a view of what's been going on in relation to human health criteria. I mentioned in 2015, EPA first released those. A couple years after, DEP started a public process of meetings and comments. And at the leading into the 2019 legislative session, DEP had recommended 56 updates at that time. But the legislature rejected those. They ended up removing them at the request of the West Virginia Manufacturers Association, who represents, among others, chemical manufacturers in the state, and convinced the legislature that more time was needed to study these criteria before West Virginia would adopt these recommended updates by the EPA. And the legislature at that time in 2019 gave a timeline for this delay or this time to do more study. And in that timeline, DEP accepted proposals from the public on the updates. We were one of 2 groups that submitted proposals along with the West Virginia Manufacturers Association. And following that, in April of this year, DEP filed their new proposal, which instead of 56 proposed updates, only put forward 24 updates. A comment period was held, and they also formed a work group. We are Manufacturers Association, other industry groups, are now meeting monthly to discuss what's going to happen with the remaining 70 that EPA recommended back in 2015. So what I have in bold is what's coming up, right, very soon. We expect in December or maybe January that the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee, this is the next stop for the proposal, before it goes to the full legislature, will debate and vote, and they can change. That's what happened in 2019. This rulemaking review committee decided that they just weren't going to move forward despite DEP's recommendation, and removed all of the updates. So we're going to be watching this closely. We hope that you all will be too. And then in February 2021, when the legislature reconvenes after the governor is inaugurated in January, it will be debated and considered before the full legislature. Our message from West Virginia Rivers on this issue boils down to, we do not want to see any standards weakened. About half of the updates that DEP is proposing would weaken or make the current standard that is currently in place less stringent. We do not, on behalf of our members and our allied organizations, we are taking the position from a policy standpoint that there is no reason to weaken standards. It's moving in the wrong direction when we're trying to protect human health. And that industries are already in compliance, are already able to meet the current standards, so why would we weaken them is part of the rationale as well. Okay, I'm gonna move quickly on to, I have a feeling we're behind. Yes, really quickly. PFAS. I don't know if you're familiar with PFAS, but I would recommend, if you're not, to Netflix the movie Dark Waters. It highlights the story out of Parkersburg, West Virginia, that tells the story of DuPont and the contamination of the drinking water supplies around Parkersburg, Vienna area. That led to human health problems for citizens of our state. So, and that was 30 years ago, more, that story took place, and still in 2020, we are struggling to make progress in regulating this group of polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS, also known as forever chemicals. They are used to make products like Teflon, non-stick kind of things, and they work well as non-stick agents because they do not break down in the environment. They're with us for a very, very long time. And what we learned from the people who went through a medical monitoring program after the DuPont situation saw direct correlations between exposure to PFAS and a lot of health problems, and drinking water being the main pathway to exposure. There was an act, Clean Drinking Water Act, that was introduced last year. It did not pass. It would have set limits, like we were just talking about, water quality standards on PFAS chemicals. That did not make it through the legislature, but what did was a study, Senate Concurrent Resolution 46. And this is at least a first step. We were supportive of this as an important first step. And what this study is doing currently is it is sampling, and DEP and DHHR are working together on this. They are sampling 280 sites of what they call raw water. And that is the water before it enters the intake of a public drinking water system. So it is our rivers, streams, in some cases groundwater wells that they are grabbing samples from and sending those to labs. Currently, they've sampled at 100 of the 280 sites as of last month, and are looking for the presence of these PFAS chemicals across the state. And if they find them, then the idea is to investigate the factors that are contributing to their presence. And we wanted to make sure that this data would be posted publicly, and that's still our understanding, that as the quality, the QA, QC comes back from the lab, that they will be published on a USGS website for all of our citizens to know about. Oh, lot going on with oil and gas. One thing I want people to be aware of is a bill that I fully expect to come back this year. It did not advance last year. It's highly contentious, as it should be, because what it does is exempt oil and gas tanks that are closest to drinking water intakes, and those what are called zones of critical concern, from the Above Ground Storage Act. So they would be exempt from state regulation under the Above Ground Storage Act program. And what's highly concerning is not only are they talking about exempting tanks that are sitting on top of our drinking water intakes, but these are also the tanks that we see across the state that are causing the most problems, that are failing. And you see some statistics here. They're not fit for service. DEP shows that the majority of tanks that are failing are related to the oil and gas industry. And here are just some examples from both of these, I think, are from Ritchie County, of how these old tanks just are not being inspected, not being updated, not being maintained as they should, and things are failing. Here's another example of failure after failure, and why these tanks are particular risk to in our watersheds. Finally, to wrap this up, other issues that session is working hopefully with DEP to solve a problem around oil, the Office of Oil and Gas. They are been operating in a budget deficit for some time. And we've seen this year that they have decreased their staffing by 60% in that office, which raises, and most of those are inspectors, and that raises concern about DEP's ability to provide adequate oversight and enforcement of the law. So that's one thing. Last year, we had a bill introduced, and probably will again this year, to look at updating our penalty structures for violations of clean water laws. Some of those have not been updated in over 30 years again, or even adjusted for inflation, penalties and fees. So we're looking to update those. I'm gonna keep us moving along. You know, I kind of want, you know, it's a big week for the political world. And, you know, we saw the state elections come through, and there was some shift in more Republicans seats being picked up in both our House of Delegates and our Senate. We saw Republicans sweep the executive and constitutional offices. So, you know, our challenge has always been, I believe, is to make clean water not a partisan issue. It's a universal value that we share as West Virginians for many reasons. And, you know, this of course is Babcock State Park. Our staff just visited there. And, you know, what I see the potential and the reality in West Virginia is we, regardless of where we are on a political spectrum, identify with the value of our rivers and streams across the state. And when you Google West Virginia, the images that come up almost always involve one of our rivers because they're beautiful and we know we have such assets. And I don't think I have time to go into this, but we did some polling. We partnered with a national group to be able to poll West Virginians about how they valued clean water. And the results were really, really clear. They believe the government. And this, again, is across, these weren't just Democrats or Republicans. They were equal. They were across the political spectrum, regardless of party. The majority of voters believe the government should play a major role in preserving the headwaters we have in West Virginia. When we asked them about public lands and how we should manage our public lands, the number1 priority was to protect water quality, fish habitat, recreation opportunities. Now this is dated a little bit, and I would like to do this again, but when we were able to do this poll with a professional national polling kind of consultant, and they did this, they found overwhelmingly, over 90% of West Virginians felt strongly that protecting water supplies should be a higher priority over keeping costs for businesses low, because we hear that tension a lot. It's either protect water, protect the environment, or jobs. When we talk to these West Virginians across the political spectrum, high majority felt like we can do both. In fact, if we have to choose what comes first, it's protecting water. And also large majority, 3/4, felt that our pollution standards we're talking about were too lax. So the idea of making them even more lax, I think we have, I know in terms of our membership, have people on our side who are really concerned about going backwards. We've made so much progress. We wouldn't want to see that undone. So I think, Autumn, I need to stop, but this is just, I could keep going because I'm so inspired by this. This was our crew. I guess this is what I'll leave you with, is that when we, you know, my experience with working in communities of people who feel empowered by becoming advocates for the places and the rivers they love, it is empowering experience. And if you are looking for new ways to grow and expand your watershed group, I urge you to consider advocacy and consider talking to people about what's important and how they can get more involved as advocates, as voices for the protection and future of their rivers. So I think I better stop. No, I can't stop. You got to go to wbrivers.org to get more information.
Well,
I've got the red arrow, which shows how you can sign up for our updates. Blue arrow, this is our home page. If you go to wbrivers.org, you can learn more about these policy issues. We urge you, if you're not on our list of policy updates, where our aim, our responsibility we take very seriously is to keep you all accurately informed of what's going on and how you can get involved. All right, done, for real.
Thank you, Angie. That was very informative and very inspiring. I think you got us fired up. I think we're ready. We're ready to go. So now we're going to shift from talking about what's ahead to celebrating some of the work that the watershed groups have been doing. So with that, we have some recognition and some awards to give out. So I'm going to share my screen. And we have the West Virginia Watershed Network, in planning this event, felt that we should give out some awards to groups. We kind of shifted the way the awards were given out. So Rick is going to take it away and conduct the award ceremony on behalf of the West Virginia Watershed Network.
All right, thank you, Autumn. And it is a privilege to be a participant in this, and especially to go through the various categories of awards that are being considered. And to, I feel a little guilty. I really haven't worked on this very hard myself. A lot of other people have put a whole lot of effort in it. Prepared me a script to read from. And so for all those that did all this work and pulled this together, I certainly appreciate it. I'm glad the effort toward the Watershed Celebration Day, or now called Watershed Symposium, I'm really glad that it's continuing, even though it's been a little different this year, but we don't have maybe the participation we've had in the past at some of our Watershed Celebration Days, but under the circumstances, this is wonderful. And Angie, really liked your presentation. That was excellent. You did a great job there. Appreciate the work of West Virginia Rivers Coalition too. So I'm just going to read from the script. So if you all be patient with me, we'll get through these awards. And like I say, I've read through everything. There are really some great projects. As far as I'm concerned, everybody is an award winner. You've worked hard on this, and you've done some great work for your streams in your areas and for the state of West Virginia. And we're all very appreciative of that. And what you do is really admirable. And I've always been impressed with volunteerism and the efforts of our watershed groups for as long as I've been, interacting with watershed groups, and that goes back for me since 1995. And when I really started working with the watershed groups on the agency I work for, which is the Federal Office of Surface Mining, we have the Watershed Cooperative Agreement Program for acid mine drainage remediation projects. So anyway, I'll get back to it here and quit rambling on and get on with the awards. So our hope has been to take a new angle with our statewide events leading to the creation of the Watershed Symposium, an event to recognize efforts of watershed groups, provide educational resources, and host accessible networking and peer-to-peer learning. In honor of this new event, we have created 5 new awards to recognize the amazing work done by you, our watershed associations across West Virginia. Each award comes with a certificate, $100 cash award, and an article written for the group's local newspaper. 4 categories had nominations stemming from the basin let me read that again. 4 categories had nominations stemming from the basin coordinators of DEP, while the 5th category had nominations from watershed associations themselves. These award winners were selected by the West Virginia Watershed Network. And so without further ado, let's see who our nominees are. Our first category is education. This category is to honor groups getting people to understand what their watershed is, why it is important, and how its health affects far-reaching things. Our first nominee is Friends of Capon River, who used a 2019 Street Partners grant to create, print, and mail an attractive statewide, stewardship guide, which reached 1,000 to 2,000 landowners in the watershed. They posted a digital version of their recently updated website, and additional copies on hand have helped the new president to get in touch with new residents, a regular occurrence in this oasis of cabins and second homes. This group regularly posts features on Facebook about the watershed. The next nominee is Save the Tiger, who is expanding their influence in the Tigard River watershed. They have held education days for students who participated in demonstrations about stream life by catching and observing insects and crayfish from the bottom of the stream and stream chemistry. Save the Tigard established an iNaturalist campaign for the watershed and received 104 entries of 74 different organisms from 23 different email addresses. Most important, Save the Tigard is progressing with the redevelopment of the Carr China Brownfield site, which is to become not only a headquarters for their own work, but also a showcase for the flora and fauna of the watershed and a park museum to educate visitors about the history of Grafton. Our final nominee is Four-Pole Creek, who has taken a more active role in their community over the past 2 years, from doing catfish in the classroom with local elementary schools to participating in multiple water festivals with their 3D virtual watershed model. Attending the legislative day at the Capitol, Four-Pole has been growing their presence and influence within the community. With the creation of a non-private Facebook page, Four-Pole has been able to share more events and knowledge with the larger community. All these groups are doing amazing work. Our winner is Four-Pole Creek Watershed Association. Here's the sample photos from the last 2 years of their hard work. Okay, so our next category is vigilance, which is meant to honor groups who ensure environmental laws are enforced, keep watch and comment on permitting issues, as well as speak out and advocate for our rivers and streams. Our first nominee is Mountain Lakes Preservation Alliance, who worked with a coalition of groups to watch pipeline construction projects with zeal to make sure that contractors fulfilled their obligations to protect rivers and streams. The group monitored streams in Upshur County every 2 weeks on the lookout for sediment or other problems. They learned how to use drones to help with this. Mountain Lakes Preservation Alliance participated in discussions about how the West Virginia spill line operates and even led tours of Doddridge County to help people understand the impacts of fracking for natural gas. Our second nominee is Greenbrier River Watershed Association, who has been a watchdog over pipeline construction and the permittees who are not following permit requirements. They send out weekly emails to their members calling for action on any upcoming legislative decisions concerning water quality, as well as make trips to the Capitol to advocate for change. Greenbrier River Watershed Association has provided public meetings and showed several environmental films such as Dark Waters to educate the community. The next group, the Friends of Hughes River Watershed Association, is our third nominee. They have been very active in advocacy work and policing of their waters due to an increase in fracking in the region. The group is well known for requesting information under the Freedom of Information Act, known as FOIA. They have used FOIAs to obtain information about the new defunct Antero Clean Water Facility. They were instrumental in instigating a meeting with DEP and other stakeholders over the use of the spill line. Finally, they have been working from many angles with DEP, the health department, and the water plant to determine if the amount of disinfectant needed for their water has risen in response to fracking in the region. All of these groups have been instrumental advocates for the rivers and streams of West Virginia, and we thank you. The winner is Mountain Lakes Preservation Alliance. Mountain Lakes Preservation Alliance, West Virginia Watershed Network is grateful for all you do. These pictures highlight some of the work they have been doing. Our next category is restoration. Created to honor the groups who fix their watersheds issues through stream cleanups, stream bank restorations, and other means. Our first nominee is Piney Creek Watershed Association, who completed 2 319 funded projects, the YMCA Soccer Complex Barren Land Project, as well as a rain garden at the Beckley Convention Center. Along with these projects, they conducted several stream cleanups, a stream stomp event to educate the public, Earth Day educational event, continue a water monitoring team with WVU Tech and a BSB. They are currently working on 319 projects in various stages. 2 of them are green infrastructure stormwater projects with Crescent Elementary Woodrow Wilson Stream Restoration and a new river-driven barren land stabilization project and wetland creation project at Shady Springs Library. The second nominee is Coal River Group. They have had a great success with 319 projects to replace, repair, and pump out septic systems along Browns Creek and Angel Fork. They replaced majorly repaired 16 systems and did pump outs on 4. CR Coal River Group generated such interest in the program that they were able to apply for a second 319, leading to phase 2 of this project. Overall, they have reduced the load by over 26 trillion colony forming units. Our third nominee is Sleepy Creek Watershed Association, who assisted in finishing most of the construction of a stream restoration project by overseeing the protection of endangered wildlife in the construction area. In conjunction with the West Virginia Conservation Agency, they developed a plan to accomplish COVID-19 safety compliant planting of the associated 87 tree riparian buffer at the end of October, as well as another 57 tree planting in southern Morgan County in November. Our final nominee is the Friends of the Cheat, who overcame several obstacles to complete the Almond Road AMD remediation project this year. After permitting took longer than expected, the contractor bids came in approximately $100,000 greater than what had been budgeted for. As those problems were overcome, coronavirus hit and shut down many businesses and much of the work going on in the state. Still, Friends of the Cheat persevered and completed the project, and in doing so removed a major source of acidity and aluminum. Our groups are amazing. We'd be lost without them. Our winner of the Restoration Award is Piney Creek Watershed Association. Thank you very much. Here are some photos spanning their many projects and sampling efforts. Our final group category tonight is Celebration, which has been created to honor the groups who get people out onto and enjoying the streams in their area. Our first nominee is the Forks of Coal Foundation, who has been busy not only getting new nature center built, but also getting people out on the coal rivers. Their floating naturalist trips, where they organize kayaking trips with a master naturalist, have been a huge success. Further, they have been developing signage for along the trails that encompass both the history and the science of the river. Finally, Friends of Coal Foundation have been getting people out to the rivers by hosting discovery hikes and scavenger hunts on their property along the river. Our second nominee is Friends of the Blackwater. They are improving trails, building new ones, and have secured pilot funds for a bridge across the North Fork of the Blackwater River to connect trails along the North Fork with trails in Blackwater Falls State Park. Friends of Blackwater has developed signage to both celebrate the history of the area and educate about the coal mining and railroad industry, industrial history of the area. Their website also includes maps to help plan your trip to the Blackwater region and, of course, volunteer opportunities. So we thank you for your efforts, and the winner is Forks of the Coal Foundation. And here are some photos of their signage as well as events they have hosted at the site. That's great. So that concludes our award ceremony. We want to thank the Watershed Associations who are working to better our rivers and streams of West Virginia. You're doing a great job. We very much appreciate it.
We're not done yet. We still have the Watershed Hero.
Tim's going to take it from here.
This category is new for us. It's something similar to what we've done before, but I'll just go ahead and read what's on the screen. Watershed Hero is someone who has contributed volunteer efforts to your organization who goes above and beyond the call of duty, someone you can depend on, does important work for the organization, and helps move your organization ahead. The first nomination, Teresa Perdue from the Coal River Group. She's done so much as a leader to clean up the Big Coal River over a 15-year period and is deserving of recognition. Her work has not just resulted in thousands of tires being removed, but she has led to the creation of new river events like Kevin's Lazy River events, which is now brings over 500 paddlers each year to visit and enjoy the Big Coal River. She has tirelessly worked and bring huge new education opportunities along with community and river improvements to her small rural region. She has engaged hundreds of local Boone County elementary students in cleanups that help clean up the longest river in our watershed. She is a master at getting others to join with her, including members of the Big Coal River branch. Her sisters and family members and the community at large join together for the common good. It is time we recognize her as 15 years of leadership and her efforts. Wonderful, wonderful work. Shaler, known as Shay Couch, from the Paint Creek Watershed Association. The Paint Creek Watershed Association nominates Shay Couch for Watershed Hero. Shay takes a leading role in the arranging events throughout the year that make a positive, tangible impact on the community. He is a long-standing and highly motivated volunteer with a drive to help support the watershed. Shay's commitment to the local community and tenuous approach can be rarely found in others. He's also an excellent motivator, encouraging other residents to get involved. Shay is a highly respected and trusted member within the local community, reliable, hardworking, and is also very friendly and approachable, which is important these days. Everyone thoroughly enjoys working and volunteering alongside Shay. Shay instills and demonstrates what civic pride is. He is always willing to help and take part in anything that will improve the watershed. Shay is the linchpin in the Paint Creek Watershed Association, and his personal commitment to the area is obvious. He's always producing new ideas, communicates with everyone involved, and works hard to make things happen. Without Shay's tenacity, drive, and selflessness commitment to the area would be breadth of many community activities, events, and improvements. It's wonderful work, Shay. Thank you. Norman Dean. Sleepy Creek Watershed Association nominates Norman Dean as a watershed hero. Norman has been a mainstay in the association for nearly 20 years. He has been a member of the board of directors and active in all activities ranging from community outreach, children education, to riparian buffer planting. In particular, Norman has been steadfast lead for Sleepy Creek and Warm Springs Watershed Association's West Virginia Save Our Streams monitoring and reporting. He has trained individual volunteers, led in-stream sampling, macroinvertebrate collection, and independently spent countless hours analyzing, categorizing, and reporting sampling to association members and to the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection. Norm is truly an unsung watershed hero. There's a lot of heroes in our watersheds, aren't there? Mark Conley, Fort Paul Creek Watershed Association would like to nominate Mark Conley for Watershed Hero Award. Mark has been a steadfast supporter of the Fort Paul Creek Watershed Association. As a board member, Mark has participated in nearly every event within our association for the last 7 years. This includes local celebration days, educational outreach to local schools, cleanup events, flood impact meetings, and promotional videos. Recently, Mark undertook the responsibility of overseeing our SPG 2020 stream sampling effort. Mark has continued regular bacterial sampling of Fort Paul Creek to help determine the health and safety implications of the creek's water quality. Rain or shine, Mark wades into the waters of Fort Paul Creek at 3 separate sampling locations twice a month. That's hard. Without Mark's effort, Fort Paul Creek Watershed Association cannot fulfill its mission to promote a healthy and clean Fort Paul Creek for our community. Phyllis Farley. Phyllis has been doing this, I'm going to read what it says, but just to let you know, Phyllis has been around for a very long time. She used to be an employee with DNR and DEP. We actually had the same job for a while, and she continues to be an amazing person. The Piney Creek Watershed Association nominates Phyllis Farley as Watershed Hero. Phyllis has been involved for over 10 years, acting as a member, chair, executive director for the Piney Creek Watershed Association. She has been and continues to be a valuable asset to the organization. She has helped to train several new executive directors on the bylaws, financials, grant report writing, and daily operations. She is on the fundraising committee, education committee, and is a main point of contact and always willing to help. Her dedication to Piney Creek and a relationship with the board members has helped to grow the capacity of the organization and create strong partnerships in community. Curtis Cece, Friends of Hughes River Watershed Association would like to nominate Curtis Cece for Watershed Hero. Curtis has been a member of FOH since the group was formed in 2013. He is a dedicated stream monitor, never been going to the stream locations since he started monitoring in 2013. Bad weather, ice, extreme cold, and slick roads have not slowed him down. He follows the proper procedures, making sure the meters are calibrated correctly. He makes observations of anything that might be impacting the streams. Curtis is a dependable volunteer, even though he has a very demanding full-time job. He always is ready to help on his days off. He is at all the Adopt a Highway cleanups, wetland work, and other cleanups we've done at North Bend Lake. Curtis is a wonderful example of a watershed volunteer. He shows up ready to do the job, whatever job needs done. He lends other volunteers a hand when they need it. He keeps his monitoring information precise, and when it's not fit to be outside, he is out there doing his monitoring when the rest of us are hiding inside. Curtis is our watershed hero. He is a perfect example of what a volunteer is, always a smile and never a groan, no matter what needs to be done. Wow, impressive. And the inaugural watershed hero is Norman Dean. Congratulations, Norman. That was a hard choice. There was a lot of great people in that group. And I'm sure that there's a lot more that we don't even know about. So tell your story. That's really important.
So on behalf of the West Virginia Watershed Network, we just want to say a huge thank you to all of the watershed organizations. Obviously, the West Virginia Watershed Network wouldn't be here without you, but you guys provide so much valuable work in this state, and we truly appreciate each and every one of you. We hoped to be celebrating at North Bend State Park, but you know, plans changed. We're just happy that you guys could all join us for this virtual celebration. We want to thank all of the conservation districts for their funding to support this event, and the Mountain Resource Conservation and Development for their grant funding, and to our Watershed Symposium Planning Committee, who were able to make this virtual event happen. Thank you all. And now we have one more presentation. Amanda?
Hey, everybody. It's Amanda Pitzer with Friends of the Cheat, and they let me come off my parental leave bench for something really fun tonight. We have one more person we want to honor tonight that I think a lot of the folks in the Zoom room know, and there's probably other folks on here who haven't had a chance to work with this individual, but we weren't sure if he was going to be around for the next Watershed Symposium. So we had the awkward conversation of, well, should we do this now or should we wait? And we didn't want to miss the opportunity to say a couple things about this individual and embarrass him a little. This person is a friend of the friend, and he's one of the helpers, and it is the one and only, drum roll. Yay! Oh, we had to, it's Rick Buckley. And I can see him in his little square shaking his head at me.
And my
Good,
face
lots of thumbs up. Oh no, you have to stay muted. That's the whole thing, is you don't get to talk on this one. Just kidding, just kidding. So, so for those of you that don't know Rick, Rick is a longtime employee of the Office of Surface Mining. And I first met Rick before I worked for Friends of the Cheat. I actually met Rick because he was a work colleague friend of the, now here's where it gets West Virginia complex, my boyfriend's daddy. And I had moved, I was moving to West Virginia, and I really fell in love with the rivers, and I really fell in love with Keith, who was Rick's coworker, colleague, and friend. And I think that that's something to say about this network of people that we're here with, is that many of us become not just colleagues, but we become friends. And that's what really motivates and kind of keeps us all going, are the friendships. And it's so good to see a lot of your faces in these little boxes tonight. And you can see some of the photos in the presentation is Rick with Keith, Rick with Sheila with the DEP, and then that little one down there is when Keith was awarded the Citizen Service Award, and Rick had a big part of that. So Adam, if you'll go to the next one. So for those who've been in this work for a while, you know that sadly Keith passed away, but before Rick knew Keith, he was really working with all of these early watershed groups before there was really programs to even fund acid mine drainage. So Rick was part of these early conversations about the needs of citizen groups. And these are two of my favorite, well, one of my favorite photos of those early days. And that is Rick and Dr. Zimkevich and Dave Assage and Bob Urim in their cool wetsuits. This is early 90s gear, you know, so you're wearing your splash top and all the mustache game in this photo is so good. If you need to zoom in on that. Please take note.
You can really see mine, right?
Yeah. Can you see it? Yeah, you can see it without zooming.
Look
and then
close.
the other photo is, I can't remember who shared it, but it came from, Rick, you might know, but the other photo is of the raft trip. And you can see Rick, he's in the middle on our side, and Dr. Z and some other folks in the boat. But that surfaced 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, when we did our Cheat Fest ceremony. So Rick's been involved with watershed groups and with Friends of the Cheat for a really, really long time. And he's gone above and beyond the call of duty. He is loyal, he's dedicated, he's involved in so many things in his home community too, which is in Jackson County. I got involved in our local solid waste authority, and I found myself at conferences with Rick. And then I think he's also, involved in the water board project, so he can't keep his hands out of things. And for a decade of OSM Vistas, he was the guy that talked too long at the trainings. So we all know Rick has been a great friend to watershed groups. Autumn, you want to go to the next one? And we've got some more photos, I think, of him at Cheat Fest. So we've brought back someone who knows Rick really well from work and just also can't stay away, which we think that Rick is also going to have hard time staying away. So I'm going to let Rick's former boss and new friend of the Cheat member and associate, now he can associate with us directly, the one and only Mr. Roger Calhoun, to say a couple things.
Hey, Roger.
Thanks, Amanda. And thank you for mentioning that I am Rick's boss. Some of you watershed folks may know me in that Rick's enthusiasm is contagious. So, when he was working for me at all these things, events, sometimes I would go, but sometimes he couldn't go. But, his enthusiasm would wear off, so I'll go, Rick. And invariably, about every time, I would be introduced as working for Rick, or Rick's poor substitute. Wasn't sure how that went. So just wanted to make sure, I was glad Amanda said, yeah, that was Rick's boss. But now I no longer am. Now I'm just a volunteer with the Friends of Cheat and really appreciate it. But Rick, I think, pointed me in that direction and, introduced me to watershed groups, and just the enthusiasm was contagious, as I said. I did tell Amanda I had one story about Rick that shows you sometimes it's great to be lucky or to be enthusiastic and to be good and understand, and sometimes it's great to be lucky. So we had an event, Cheat Fest, we were going to, where we were going to take the Assistant Secretary Watson on one of those trips like Bob Ure went on down the Cheat River Canyon. And so, Rick's got everything planned, well planned, Rick. And so the Assistant Secretary decided that she wanted to get out about halfway down the canyon. Dave Bassage figured out how to do that. So we told her we would meet her at a gas station and pick them up, and somebody would take their car. However, what Rick failed to think about is there's two of us in the front seat, and all that Watershed Celebration Day booth stuff is in the rest of the vehicle. I mean, back seat, trunk, everything is full. Our big display case, pictures. At that time, the feds still gave away giveaways, Frisbees and water bottles, and we were full. So probably as we were topping the hill there in Kingwood, heading down to pick him up, I looked in the back seat and said, Rick, you just told the Assistant Secretary we were going to pick her up and her husband. Where are we going to put him? And, we were panicking because this is, you want to make a good impression with these big political muckety mucks. So, and they can help with the funding. So we said, I don't know, we got to call somebody. And that was our first time, I think, we actually had cell phones. But we didn't know really how to use them very well, except I hit speed dial 1, either on Rick's or mine, I'm not sure. we didn't, reception in Kingwood. We got the speed dial one, didn't even know who I was calling, was DEP Secretary Stephanie Timmermeyer. And I said, Stephanie, how would you like to work with the Assistant Secretary, Watson? And Stephanie was all excited. So all you got to do is pick her up at ye old gas station. So it all did work out. And it looked as if Rick had planned it that way, that we would get the two, high people together. And I think that's probably been a lot of Rick's career, is he either planned it that way or it looked like he planned it that way. And because everybody wanted to help Rick, and it all works out. And Rick, we really have appreciated you. And I did work with you. Sometimes had to, understand that you were supposed to be my employee, but we all worked together, and you taught me a lot. So I appreciate it.
Good. Thanks. I appreciate it too.
That's it for me.
Thank you, Roger. So Rick can really be, as Roger said, the guy that kind of like seems like he planned it. Well, he did plan this. This is a photo of him at the 25th Cheat Fest wearing the original, the very first Cheat Fest shirt ever that has the shared logos of FOC and Rivers Coalition, because little known fact, the first Cheat Fest was a joint venture between FOC and Rivers. So here's Rick showing off his shirt to all the paddlers and, getting his huge rounds of applause. But then Rick can also do something like this and show up at Watershed Celebration Day in full clown makeup, like a total goober, but willing to take the lead and always be on the mic. And we thank him for that, how many Watershed Celebration Days that he's done the awards and been a good sport about it. And then I did talk to some of your other coworkers, Rick, and we wanted to remember one of your most memorable parables, which is Autumn, of course. Any idiot can plant a tree.
But not everybody can deal with acid mine drainage. That's the other part of this.
Yeah, I knew you wouldn't be able to not explain yourself. So Rick, thank you so much for everything you've done for FOC and for all the watershed groups across West Virginia and throughout your career. And we're not pushing you out the door. We want you to stick around. But we didn't want to miss the opportunity to honor you. And you know that as soon as you do retire, you'll be recruited to be a volunteer for Friends of the Cheat. So you're not getting rid of me anytime soon. So thank you. That's the last thing we wanted to do tonight. And I don't know if you wanted to say anything. I mean, you've always talked too long on events, so we might as well let you continue if you want to say anything.
Yeah, well,
no,
I certainly
really.
do. I certainly do. Well, I appreciate it. I've had a great career. I've been given great opportunities, and especially getting involved in water quality and working with watershed groups. I mean, that's a dream come true for anybody in a career. So it's been wonderful for me. I just feel blessed in that way. But I'm working with great people. I'm working with West Virginians. I mean, who better to work with, right? And working in the great state of West Virginia. So I am planning to retire. I think my last day will be January 2nd. And so, and like you said, I'm actually, chair of our solid waste authority in the county. And I have been for, I think, 25 years. And I went from the utility board with the city of Ripley to city council. So I'm still involved there and some other things. So yeah, I'm involved locally and statewide. So, and we have a farm in the Cheat River drainage. So up on Dry Fork. So I'm still in that drainage too. So it's been great. I appreciate the recognition. It is a surprise. You didn't embarrass me. So mission accomplished. But I'll stop going on, but I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
thanks everyone for sticking around for a little bit longer to get to share in that special recognition for Rick before he retires. That was fun to watch. So we hope to do a group photo with all of the Zoom boxes. We're like one large Brady Bunch.
I have one request. I don't know if anybody else feels pent up, but I think we should all unmute and just like congratulate everybody and recognize everybody's efforts. And I would love to get the group photo of us cheering and doing that. So go ahead and unmute yourself so we can hear all your voices.
Yay!
Yay!
All right.
Hey.
Let's go Nevada.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Autumn. Bye, everybody.
Good seeing everyone.
Have a lovely night. See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Good night, all.
Bye. Thanks again.